Kaitiaki, and welcome to Now That's What I Call Green. I'm your host, Brianne West, an environmentalist and entrepreneur trying to get you as excited about our planet as I am. I'm all about creating a scientific approach to making the world a better place, without the judgment and making it fun. And of course, we will be chatting about some of the most amazing creatures we share our planet with. So if you are looking to navigate through everything green or not so green, you have come to the right place. Kia ora, I am Brianne, and I am the kind of irritating person who wants to talk about rewilding, particularly wildflowers. If you follow me on social media, you're probably over this topic. And if you are, I'm sorry, you're probably in the wrong place for today, because that is what today's episode's about. This episode is a little bit special. For one, Earth Day is basically right after this episode goes live. So it's like a cosmic sign that we should talk about giving the planet some love, I suppose. But also, rewilding isn't actually something I've just read about in glossy magazines. It's actually something I have done and been doing for years, and I am absolutely seeing the payoff in my own garden. It's really quite remarkable how quickly the planet will regenerate if we just left it alone, or even better, gave it a helping hand. I remember when I moved in, there was absolutely nothing in this place. It had been neglected for, I think we estimate about 4 to 5 years, so not really that long, but it was full of weed mat and dead plants and just misery and ignorance and neglect. Like there were literally bullet holes in the wall. I don't want to go into why, mainly because I don't know why, but also I don't want to think too hard about why, so I'm just going to ignore it. But we pulled out the weed mat. We planted, I think, on last count, 8,000 plants, about 50-50 native exotic, because of course we have both native and exotic insects and wildlife. And then lots and lots of work, but we've just, let it grow, and it's freaking amazing. It looks absolutely beautiful. If you don't believe me, go and have a look at my social media. You'll see what I mean. But today I want to have a talk about what rewilding actually is, and it's not just letting your garden go feral. Somebody said that to me the other day. It's just an excuse not to mow your lawn. Well, no. But also, if you don't want to mow your lawn, go for it. It's way better for the environment. But I also wanted to include some famous examples from around the world and right here in Aotearoa, and as well as how you can get started. I also wanted to just touch on, in light of the news, why rewilding extends beyond wildflowers to also bringing back extinct wildlife. And I was going to use the woolly mammoth as an example, but now apparently we have dire wolves. Of course we don't. They are grey wolves with a sprinkling of an ancient genome. Like, they're as much of a dire wolf as I am. And actually the whole hype around it has been kind of a bit anti-science, oddly enough, from a science organisation, but here we are. So rewilding is an interestingly controversial subject, but let's have a look at how we can help nature heal, shall we? Rewilding is the term used in many conservation organisations, which is a phrase you should say 3 times fast, and it's usually to sound more exciting than habitat conservation or habitat restoration. But if I am particular about it, in broad terms, rewilding simply means to bring an ecosystem back to something close to its original state before humans started mowing the living daylights out of everything and planting pine trees everywhere. That involves stepping back, often letting nature do the hard work if the area hasn't been too messed up, and just leaving it alone, or it sometimes means rolling up our sleeves, digging out weed mat, and doing a lot of stuff like planting or removing weeds or introduce predators. It can be from either side of the spectrum. Either way, the end goal is a healthy, self-sustaining ecosystem, like how it used to be, because there are very few truly wild spaces anywhere in the world anymore, and that's pretty alarming. As I mentioned in the intro, there are some people out there who just think that rewilding is an excuse for laziness, which is baffling to me, but there are people who will call you lazy for almost anything these days. The idea that it's just letting everything go wild is an oversimplification, because we're ignoring the fact that there are so many environments that are so trashed. If we just left them alone, they'd turn into gorse jungles or pest-ridden wastelands. So sorry to break it to you. If your land is overrun with stoats, and I appreciate they're cute, but they are not good in Aotearoa. And if it's tinder dry from deforestation, or it's rock hard from bloody weed mat, which I will ban when I'm Supreme Overlord, you can't just leave it to nature to try and fix it. That's not how it works. But there is the point on the flip side, of course, that we can go too far and we can get too involved. That's a conversation that a lot of people who participate in wildlife photography actually have. They are often witnessing some pretty horrific acts, or some, wildlife that might be starving, or environments that need some help. But the job of a photographer is to document, not get involved. There are some very famous examples where we may have gone too far in the opposite direction. Are we helping nature? Are we just controlling it? Or really, are we just overthinking it and we just need to get on with it? I kind of feel like that's the answer to a lot of these things we debate. But I want to start with some famous stories. Tomorrow is Earth Day. Apparently, the Earth only gets a day, or I guess a month, if you're a brand and wanting to use it as a marketing opportunity. And you're going to see a lot of negative communication, so let's have some positive stuff. First of all, Yellowstone. I don't know if there's many people who haven't heard of this story. Yellowstone National Park, and it's wolves. It's the poster child for reintroducing an apex predator after nearly a century of wiping them out. So back in the late 1800s, folks decided that wolves weren't great because they were, of course, predating on their cattle, predating on the wildlife, probably predating on people, although actually wolves don't do that too much, so perhaps not. So they said, well, see you, wolves, and eradicated them, as humans are just so good at doing. Then, of course, elk populations exploded, as you'd expect. They grazed everything down in sight, and they turned many parts of the park into kind of a desiccated, weed-strewn nightmare, unless you're an elk, and then it was heaven. And the impact it actually had on the land cannot be overstated. Pictures of Yellowstone from back then show that it's massively lacking in biodiversity, which is a sign of a healthy ecosystem. It looks dry. It looks almost like a desert, but not, which is just the best description ever. But if we fast forward to 1995, they brought wolves back. Elk get the reminder that life isn't a perpetual buffet. Vegetation starts recovering. Beavers return. Beavers are one of my favourite animals in the whole world. Beavers return, they build dams, they redirect rivers. Because of that, wetlands have flourished, and everybody celebrated. And that was from the reintroduction of one species. And that's pretty freaking phenomenal. The proper term by ecologists is a trophic cascade. It just basically means that if you fix one thing at the top of the food chain, it will ripple down to benefit plants and animals and river systems. Fix one big problem, and a bunch of smaller problems sort themselves out. Now, obviously, it wasn't all a fairy tale. Ranchers near Yellowstone became, again, afraid for their wildlife. Some remain upset to this day. But a lot of other people welcomed the return of the wolves as a huge tourist boon. I mean, I would love to go there and befriend a wolf because I have this ridiculous notion that animals will understand that I love them and I mean them no harm. So they'll be nice to me. And it's probably only a matter of time till I'm eaten by something. That is why I've had the rabies jab, even though I live in a country that doesn't have rabies. So far, off topic. But that's kind of rewilding in a nutshell, really. Nature is stoked, does well. Humans have mixed feelings about it. And eventually we find some level of coexistence, although coexistence isn't actually our strength. Talking about beavers, Scotland has done something relatively similar. After a few centuries of realising that, maybe killing all the beavers was a bad idea, they decided they'd bring them back. So, surprise, beavers actually do really good stuff. And did you even know they existed in Scotland way back when? Well, there you go. They do all the same good stuff in Scotland that, of course, they do in North America. They slow down rivers. That means they create wetlands, which helps out fish and birds, helps out invertebrates, all the way down, and, of course, annoys anyone who doesn't like watery landscapes. Now, just as a contrary to what people think about beavers don't just build dams willy-nilly. They don't think, oh, there's a thing, there's a stick, I'm going to chew it and make a dam. They're nature's engineers. There's a famous story from a couple of months ago where beavers saved Czech taxpayers about $1.2 million by building a dam where they were already planning to. And they did it much quicker and probably much more structurally sound. Beavers are nature's little engineers. And Scotland is one of the many places reaping the rewards. Now, they're also talking about bringing back lynx to manage deer populations and help forests recover, a little bit like the story on Yellowstone. But as you can imagine, that one's going down a little bit less well, because some farmers will see that as the introduction of sheep-killing ninjas, and people argue about whether it's safe, whether there's enough room, and whether the highlands can handle those apex predators again. At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, bring them back. It was their home first, but apparently you have to tread carefully when you're working with lots of people. This is why I'm not a diplomat. In northeastern Argentina, the Iberian wetlands may be one of the largest rewilding projects on Earth, and I keep saying this, but this is one of my favourite animals, the jaguar. Now, if you're from England, you'll say jaguar. Wherever you're from almost anywhere else, you say jaguar. I do not know which is correct, but I think jaguar sounds quite posh, so I won't be saying it because I don't want to sound silly. But apparently jaguars used to roam there until people, they shot them. And now conservationists are doing the work of reintroducing the coolest cats in the world to control herbivore populations like peccaries and capybaras. And yes, capybaras are also awesome, but there is a lot of them and they do cause harm. The ecological results are promising. although it's still early, and unfortunately local ranchers are not super on board with this yet, but they will be when they see the benefit to nature, which is, of course, something they rely on as farmers too. One of the biggest lessons from there when I read some of the stuff from conservation experts is that you simply will not have a successful rewilding project unless you get the local communities on board, particularly farmers. My last two examples are much closer to home here in Aotearoa. Zealandia, we have probably all heard of it. It's in Wellington. It's a fenced sanctuary that aims to restore the valley to how it may have looked centuries ago, chock full of native birds and lizards and insects, because we have some pretty cool native wildlife, or at least we did do. The fence is high-tech, the pest eradication is ongoing and relentless, and the payoff so far is pretty bloody awesome, actually. There's kaka in the middle of Wellington. People have spotted them in local Wellington suburbs. And I mean, if that's not a sign of success, I don't know what it is. I love Zealandia. Almost more than anything, because you think of rewilding, you think of rural, right? Well, this is in the middle of one of our largest cities. This moves the rewilding conversation back into more of the mainstream. It shows city folk. I've been called a city folk person one too many times by farmers. But it shows them what real biodiversity looks like and what we can achieve in an area you wouldn't have thought we could. It's definitely a bit managed. It's less wild, more wildlife reserve, I suppose. I mean, the fence is a major intervention, but it works. You can walk in and you just feel different. It's nature bathing, or forest bathing, I think it's called. And I'm not a big fan of woo-woo in general, but there is definitely something to that. You just feel so good in nature that is in tip-top condition. There's another one in Aotearoa you may not have heard of, which is called Tahi, and I had the absolute privilege of staying there a couple of weeks ago. I'm on the board of the WWF New Zealand, and one of the principals of Tahi is also on the board, and we got a tour. It's a private reserve. It was started in the 1990s by her family. The landowners decided to get rid of predators. They wanted to replant native trees. It was full of pine and cattle, and they just wanted to restore it to how it was. Now, again, in only a few short decades, and this is a big place, there are kaka, kereru, kokako, an incredible forest, the most beautiful landscape, wetlands, ponds, lizards. It was beautiful. And they're nowhere near done. They've just bought another massive property further north where they're going to do something similar. It's pretty incredible. And the Tahi story, it warms my heart a little bit the more I knew about it, because it was proof that private people, a smaller group of people could really, truly make an enormous difference. And it was beautiful. We were actually there at the same time that David Attenborough's director, casually dropping that into conversation, had dinner with David Attenborough's director. He is so cool. I really want him to come on the podcast, but I'm too scared to ask him. I might have to get a bit of a grip. Anyway, we were there with them as they were filming Tahi for a documentary. So you'll see that on screens near you soon. So if that doesn't make you feel slightly more positive about what's going on in the world, I don't know what will. But you probably noticed that those rewilding stories have all focused around apex predators. So the wolves, the jaguars, the lynx, because these animals have an outsized impact on ecosystems. And unfortunately, Murphy would be proud, they're also the animals that we tend to target indirectly or directly with our super conservational ways. We get rid of predators because they are a risk to us and our livestock. And of course, when we move into those areas, we tend to chase them off. Now, apex predators will scare or eat herbivores that would otherwise overgraze areas. That's what happened to Yellowstone. They also keep smaller predators in check, which helps maintain populations of, say, ground nesting birds or rodents. Now, not all rodents, when they're in their native habitats, are problematic. You hear rodent, you think ick, but they are also an incredibly important group of species. And the ripple effects go on to the point where we can't possibly fathom them. It goes all the way down to the soil. When soil is sampled in areas that have been successfully rewilded, the soil biome, and that matters more than you can imagine, is infinitely more diverse and healthier. But in saying that, apex predators aren't the only way, or even the best approach in some cases. Some habitats are better off looking at smaller keystone species like beavers, who of course aren't an apex predator, or bison, who again, not an apex predator, or simply with more pollinators or less invasive flora, so weeds and things. And those are definitely easier conversations to have because, of course, apex predators freak people out. Well, normal people. If you live in an area where there are big carnivores just rocking about, and more of us do than we might realise, you might have mixed feelings about, yay, nature. And I guess fair enough. But again, if I saw a jaguar just walking down the road, I would die of happiness. I might then actually die for real, but got to be honest, I think it'd be worth it. The other thing, of course, is they are charismatic megafauna. And that is the phrase used by conservationists because they are the ones that get all the donations. They are the ones that get all the press. Whales are a great example. They are something people really get behind. But then when you look at sharks who face a horrific fate, we don't care. Large, obviously. Sharks are one of my favourite animals. Oh my God, how many favourite animals do I have? But when it comes to sharks, which face, of course, a much worse fate, where we kill 100 million a year, whereas they kill 6 to 8 a year, 6 to 8 of us, we don't care as much. This is something else you have to consider when you are having these conversations with your local communities. And again, that's success to rewilding, is to ensure that people actually care about what you're supporting. Australia has one of the highest donations to its wildlife charities in the world, and that is because it has loads of charismatic megafauna. The koala is the obvious choice there, but there's also the kangaroo, the quokka, the most adorable animal on earth. In fact, I'm wearing quokka socks, so that's appropriate. But those animals are the ones that engender the press, the money, and therefore what we tend to build rewilding around. But they are a single piece of the puzzle, not the whole game. Now, if we talk about the big debate within rewilding, which is whether we leave it alone and see what happens, or if we get involved and potentially control it, I think it's a pretty clear answer, and that it depends on the level of damage. If you've got a forest that's only mildly disturbed, maybe all you need to do is stop logging it and wander off. Great. But if you've got farmland that has been chemically treated for decades, it's got compacted soil, it has a total lack of topsoil, it's got pest species everywhere, good luck. That's not going to magically revert back to its original pristine state. It's not how it works. You're going to have to get digging. Now, I'm a bit of a control freak. I don't know if this is the only child entrepreneurial thing coming out of me, but I like getting involved. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've rewilded my property, but I've done a little bit of experimentation where I've sort of put some things aside and left it to see what happens. And then I have really got involved with other areas. And I have to be honest, the areas I've got involved, infinitely better. You can't micromanage every single thing because nature is not to be micromanaged, it's to be worked with. But you can't just leave it as well. I mean, unfortunately, a little part of my property is made up of pine forest, which as we speak over the last couple of weeks has been chopped down. And over the next couple of years, I will be creating a native forest, which I'm very excited about, until I have to start planting things, I suppose. The sweet spot is active rewilding at first, get rid of pests, reintroduce crucial species, ideally beavers because they're great, plant some natives, and then step back and see what happens. And if you need to get involved again, great. But if not, you've done a good thing. Back to this whole debate about de-extinction. People are genuinely talking about bringing woolly mammoths back. You've got to wonder why? Why do we want to do that? Do we want to do that? I mean, I'd love to see a woolly mammoth. That'd be the coolest thing ever. But is it actually beneficial for the planet when there are animals going extinct hand over fist, some before we even know that they do exist? Tasmanian tigers are another one. Dire wolves, I honestly thought they were a fictional animal. I didn't know they were real until I saw the news article last week. I only knew about them because of Game of Thrones, and I've never even seen Game of Thrones. Now, some scientists are absolutely pro bringing these animals back. They are claiming it will help restore lost ecosystems because mammoths used to stomp around the tundra, right? And that helped prevent permafrost from melting. Others say that that's absolute nonsense and resources are far better spent protecting endangered species. I am definitely in the latter camp. As much as I want to see a woolly mammoth, I really just think we should look after the elephants we have now. I mean, could you imagine having woolly mammoths just stomp around? Traffic accidents would be a whole new story. But putting aside the fun things we could do, their ancient habitats don't really exist anymore. And with climate changing faster and faster, we just have to manage them like a zoo exhibit. And what is the point in bringing back one of the most incredible animals to put it in a zoo? I've got to be honest, I think money is motivating these decisions. Money and a bit of scientific curiosity for sure, and perhaps a little bit of human ego. It's expensive. So is it rewilding? No, I think it's just humans playing with high-tech toys. Let's prioritise not driving current species to extinction first, and then maybe we look at what we can do elsewhere. Maybe once we stop killing everything that wanders the earth, we can look at bringing the mammoth back. But to refer to my earlier point about direwolves, would it be a mammoth or would it just be a slightly hairier elephant? I'm not sure we have the entire genome for the mammoth. Rewilding is important to me because since I bought my lifestyle block a few years ago, that's what I've been doing. It's a really lovely way. You come home from the chaos of running a startup and you get into the chaos of running a lifestyle block. I've wanted a lifestyle block since I can remember. I have been obsessed with animals for as long as I can remember, and naturally you need land to have as many animals as possible. But it's quite funny because I never cared about gardening until I bought a house, and then I immediately became a gardener. No, I'm not one of these gardeners who plans things and creates ornate borders. I'm not a manicured kind of person. I quite like wild, jungly environments. And again, if you look at my social media, you will see what I mean. But the difference I've been able to create with, I do have a gardener who he's not really a gardener as much as a lifestyle manager, because I can't manage this on my own, even with my parents' wonderful help. But the difference that we have made in just a few short years really is astonishing. It's beautiful. The number of birds, there was no bird life when I moved in. There was no insect life. And I know a lot of you don't like insects, but I can't begin to explain to you how important they are to life on Earth. I've done a couple of episodes on it. And now there's lizards running around. They are so cute. Lizards are just adorable, but the bird life is quite impressive. There is welcome swallows. There is bellbirds. I had to shout at one this morning because it was trying to wake me up. I'm not a very nice person in the morning. I can hear owls at night, the most beautiful sound. All this that did not occur just a few short years ago. When I moved in, it was mostly weed mat and lawn. There was some old gardens that had been neglected, and that was where the weed mat was. But honestly, there was acres and acres of lawn. Not paddock, big ass English-style lawn. So I knew I was going to get rid of that. I got rid of it in chunks because digging up acres is no small feat. So I created what I have deemed insect islands, and created islands in the lawn that are somewhat connected, that are quite close to one another, so animals can traverse between. That way I still have the benefits of a lawn, because people like lawn to play on, and friends who bring kids over or animals have something to run around on. But you have these big, beautiful patches of native plants, or these wildflower meadows that are supporting biodiversity and wildlife. I've got a beehive. I've created wildflower meadows specifically for butterflies and bees. I've talked about the native forest. I've got a stream running through the property, which is just beautiful. So I'm thinking about wetlands and as to whether that would be helpful, but I need to speak to a natural expert. But my favourite bit is the dino dome. And I have just done this, making it up as I go along. Now, obviously, I have a biology degree, but I only did one paper in botany because I've got to be honest, it didn't interest me very much. It was more interesting than I thought it would be, but I have no business to be doing this on my own, and yet that's how I operate. So I've just gone in, I've used common sense, bit of scientific understanding, read a couple of books, and just got into it. And it's worked out really nicely, by and large. Could it have perhaps been better if I had planned it to death and had some structure? Maybe, but I'll never know, and I am not like that. So you don't actually have to rewild in any particular way. You know, if you want to approach it with, let's try this and see what works, it's worked for me. But the dino dome is something I came up with totally randomly, but makes a lot of sense in retrospect. Now, I know, before anybody gets at me in the comments, lizards are not dinosaurs, but lizard dome does not have the alliterative twang that I like. The dino dome is lizard heaven. We have some incredible native geckos and native skinks, particularly down here, actually, and I'm in Canterbury. And I saw one a few weeks after I moved in, and I thought, oh, that's good to know that that's there. And then I didn't see any. So we put the dino dome in. It's just an area of rocks and rotten wood, and it's free of hedgehogs, which are a really big problem. It's ideally free of cats. Unfortunately, my neighbours have cats, and it's difficult, obviously. It's got everything lizards could possibly want, including sources of water. The flowers have attracted lots of invertebrates, which are, of course, their prey. And now we're seeing a lot more lizards than we were. The one side of this that I don't like is, of course, pest control, because I love hedgehogs. I think stoats are one of the cutest animals on planet Earth. I adore possums, but they all wreak massive amounts of havoc. It's not their fault that they're in the wrong place, but unfortunately we do have to remove them, and I do it in the most humane manner. Poison is, I understand that in some situations it's unavoidable, but poison is inhumane. Trapping is the best option, and there are some really wonderful organisations around Aotearoa who help people trap pests in their backyard, which is a wonderful way to contribute to Predator-Free 2050. But the transformation really is just incredible. The soil is richer, things grow faster, the birds are louder, arguably too loud. The insect life is just bonkers. Honestly, you can barely walk for butterflies some days. I've once or twice had a few people ask me if I've lost my mind, and one of my business partners came around once and said, "What's with all your weeds?" He was talking about the wildflowers. People who like manicure gardens probably wouldn't like my place, but it's perfect. It's definitely the wild and rewilding. And it's quite cool because you tackle one project, like the insect islands or the dino dome, and it gives you the confidence to tackle the next. Because I assure you, 2 years ago, the idea of chopping down an acre worth of pine forest, which is just dead underneath because of the compounds that pine needles secrete, that would have freaked me right out, and I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. Now, can't wait to get in there and watch other people dig holes. I've got 2 final points. What is the point in rewilding? if the climate is changing so dramatically that native habitats are changing? It's a good question because, yes, rewilding will absolutely have an impact on climate change. We've done it at enough scale, but it's not a silver bullet. We need healthy forests, we need healthy wetlands and grasslands because they store carbon far more effectively than bloody pine forest does. Soil, we are losing more soil than you might imagine, and rewilding massively impacts the health of topsoil and biomass. We need coastal marshes, we need mangroves, seagrass meadows. All of these are areas that are currently being rewilded and that we need more of. So it will help lock carbon away, but it will also help us be more adaptable to the things that we are absolutely going to struggle with because of already baked in climate change. But it's certainly not a silver bullet. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. We can't just plant trees. We can't plant our way out of this. We need to stop consuming stuff we don't really need, which is something I've talked about a million times. I don't need to keep re-emphasizing. And there is lots of other things we need to do to stop the planet from continuing to boil. Although ultimately, the three most powerful things you can do are eat less meat, stop throwing food away because food waste is breathtakingly impactful for the climate, and talk about it. Fossil fuel change is not going to come from individual action. Fossil fuel change is a systemic change. And to do that, we need to talk about it. We need to get governments to understand this is what we are demanding will happen. So one of the best things you can do to help prevent further climate change is to talk about it. Friends, family, online, offline, whatever you want to do, talk about it. But rewilding is definitely a lovely part of the piece. And it's a pretty part of the piece. And it's a productive one too. And you might be listening and thinking, well, this sounds great, but I don't have a lifestyle block. Now, I will absolutely agree with you. I'm incredibly lucky to have the land that I do. But even if you just have a balcony, you can still get involved because small things actually matter. So you can plant herbs or small native flowering plants in a pot. If you skip the pesticides, you've created like a microhaven in the middle of a city or the middle of a town for bees and butterflies and other invertebrates. And yes, that makes a difference. If you are really keen, you could create a community garden, and there's loads more of them even now than there was even 5 years ago. There's lots of empty sections, particularly in Ōtautahi Christchurch because of the earthquake, and a lot of these areas have been turned into really lovely community areas, including community gardens. If you've got a small backyard, consider not mowing your lawn as frequently because having that longer length of grass allows other species of grass to grow, to get a foothold, which creates biodiversity, which attracts more invertebrates, which attracts birds, and so on and so forth. Rewilding is not about size, it's about mindset. And yes, that sounds like the phrase you're thinking of. I do sometimes get messages from people who say, I really, really want to join you and rewild, but I only have a balcony or I don't have any lawn. And my response every time is, I promise you there is something you can do because every single bit counts, particularly in urban deserts. And it might seem small, but imagine if a whole bunch of people started doing this and all of a sudden you have this mini mosaic of people spread throughout a town, all making a difference in the wildlife population and biodiversity around. Pretty cool. Obviously, councils and governments can play a huge part in this too. One of my favourite parts about visiting England, and I got to be honest, I don't have too many favourite parts about visiting England, and I can say that because my family's English. They don't do anything with their verges. They've sprinkled them with wildflower seeds, I assume, and they've left them. They don't mow them. So they are havens for all sorts of wildlife. The bird life is crazy. There's loads of flying insects, particularly bees. And I tell you, it's a lot nicer than constantly hearing mowing noises and seeing those gigantic council mowers everywhere. It's absolutely beautiful. It saves money. It increases biodiversity, helps prevent climate change. And for the life of me, I don't know why every country isn't doing it everywhere. Then you've got marine rewilding too. That's really cool. Like the coral gardeners in Tahiti who are replanting coral because, of course, coral reefs. I don't have much positive to say about coral reefs, which I genuinely finding horrifically grief-inducing as a scuba diver because coral reefs are probably done. The amount of warming baked in is probably the death knell for 99% of coral reefs, and we may be able to do something about it, and Coral Gardeners are certainly one of the many organisations giving it a go, but in a decade's time, coral reefs will not be what you see today. So if you want to go and see them, I would suggest you go and get your scuba licence and get out in that ocean toot sweet. With Earth Day tomorrow, ultimately I think we're at a tipping point. There is a lot going on. People are more distrustful, more miserable, but also more politically motivated and more informed than ever before. I think people are realising that purely exploitative models where, we expand farmland endlessly, we use people and we don't pay them a living wage, which is, I cannot believe something people accept. Not the people paid the living wage, but we as people, I cannot believe how many times I have to say that if your business cannot pay a living wage, it doesn't deserve to be in business, and people fight me on it. How are people not understanding that if you are not paying your employees a wage that they can live on, that is exploitation? It's that simple. Slight side note. But I do think we're at that tipping point. And rewilding offers a really constructive alternative. It's doing something. It's tangible. It's visually obvious. It's also biologically obvious. I don't know if that's a term. I'm going with it though, but it's obvious in the way that everything feels. You can see it. You can touch it. Everybody can get involved. It's not massively expensive and it has quick paybacks. That's why I talk about rewilding so often, is I just see it as a real win. It's not the win. It's not it. It's not perfect, but it's a bloody good start. I mean, if humans will debate anything, from whether we can reintroduce wolves to what colour a dress is. It's gold and white, by the way. But if enough of us just stop talking and start doing, we'll be in a far better spot. And if you're listening, and I hope that you still are, because this has been a little bit rambly, and can I blame that I had surgery a week ago? I'm gonna. Here's your pep talk. Pick one small change you can make around your area. It does not matter how big it is. If you have a yard, maybe let a portion of your lawn grow. If you have a balcony, pop a plant pot, or even just a saucer with some marbles and some water in it. So if some thirsty bees bumble on by, they can have a drink. If you're a farmer, you will know infinitely more than I do, so I don't really want to tell you what to do. But is there something you can do to leave wetlands intact? Can you plant some kind of native hedge or create a native area? I know that you're incentivized to do some of these things, but I also know that for some reason the government is massively incentivizing pine plantations, which I know farmers are also against. That's another thing, and it's probably a whole episode in itself, but so many people think when you talk rewilding, you're talking anti-farmer. You are not. Farmers are the ultimate rewilders. They are the ones who started this. It's not even rewilding to them, it's basic land management. So the idea of lecturing farmers and telling them how to rewild is laughable. And if you can't do any of the things I've just mentioned, why not try and volunteer somewhere like Zealandia or Orokonui in Dunedin? Volunteering is one of those things that also makes you feel so good, because action is the cure for anxiety. And we're all a little bit anxious about things, I suspect, at the moment. If you're not anxious, you're not paying attention. But every little effort builds that momentum. Rewilding is not a fairy tale, but it's also not a pipe dream. It is something that absolutely makes a difference, and we have plenty of real-world examples. And I think that is the hope we need to face Earth Day tomorrow. Because if I see one more frickin' brand talk about how buying their tote bag and they'll donate 15 cents to some nonsense, I really will scream. On that note, don't fall for the Earth Day BS, but enjoy it. Go out and have a walk if you can. We live in the most incredible place with the most incredible animals, and sometimes I think we forget that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a little bit rambly, a little bit philosophical. Feel free to share it, maybe to someone who still mows their lawn every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Next week, we're having a bit of a shift in pace because I'm going to talk nuclear power, because I love nuclear power, but maybe not what you're thinking. So I'll see you next week. Mā te wā. And there you go. I hope you learned something and realised that being green isn't about everything in your pantry matching with those silly glass jars or living in a commune. If that's your jam, fabulous. But sustainability at its heart is just using what you need. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't keep it to yourself and feel free to drop me a rating and hit the subscribe button. Kia ora, and I'll see you next week.